This is I, the artist, the creative, conscious being.
My husband and I have had this conversation quite a few times about the need to paint. Sometimes I don't feel like I've done well because of that imposter syndrome, and lots of times I've come back and I've talked to my husband about it and I've said, look, should I just give up? If I stop now, then I will fail, and if I carry on, then I might fail, but it's not guaranteed. Maybe I don't put myself out there, maybe I don't show my art to anyone ever, but I need to keep painting anyway. So I remember this one time, I can't have been more than 10, probably younger than that, and I was at my best friend's house, and I thought I was just going to be there to play, as you always do with dolls or whatever we were playing with at the time. I came in and she took me into her dining room, and she'd got the hostess trolley and she had filled it with pens and sparkly bits and bits of paper and glue and scissors and all sorts of different types of paper. And she said, we put this together for you because we know you like making things, so you go ahead. And that was me for the whole afternoon. They played around me and I just sat at the table making things, and I was so happy, absolutely delighted. It was the best thing that she could have done for me. Every child paints and draws and loves to get their fingers messy. And I did that and I loved it. But I love to sing, and so I always imagined that I would be a singer, and I don't think it was just a childish whim. I could sing, and I did sing, and won several competitions and things like that. So I really wanted to pursue that. Onward the sailors cry, carry the lad that's born to be king, over the sea to sky. Loud the winds roar, loud the waves howl, thunderclaps rend the air. Baffled our foes stand by the shore, follow they will not dare. Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. At some point, I think it was probably when I was choosing my GCSEs or A-levels or something, my parents said, no, now you've got to be serious. You can't do music, you can't be a singer because that's never going to happen. So you need to choose a more professional career. So those are the subjects that you're going to choose at school. You can do your music any other time if you want to. And we fought a long battle, and eventually I gave in and pursued law. I did what my parents wanted me to do and had a professional career. But at the same time, that artistic need was still bubbling away. And what I realised only very recently is during that time I had been keeping sketchbooks very regularly, and I hadn't even realised I'd been doing it. But when I look back, I've got sketchbooks, and sometimes I've dated them and sometimes I haven't, but they have gone back from that time that I kind of gave up art to now. And it's only looking back that I realised I never did give up art. It's always been there. About 4 years ago, something like that, my son had turned 2, and having children is all consuming. So I was so busy with him and with work, and there wasn't any space left for me. I think a lot of people I've talked to have said that when they become mothers, they lose themselves. For me, that certainly was true. And I remember talking to my husband about it a number of times, and he said, you need to just go upstairs in the evenings and lock yourself away. He worked for the University of Creative Arts, and during one of his the Freshers' fairs, he as a member of staff had visited one of the Freshers' fairs, and he'd got like a sketchbook. He gave it to me and he said, just here you go, in case you want to put anything in this. And so I took it upstairs and I locked myself away for an hour that evening. And I did some sketching. I think I just went online or on YouTube or something and found some tutorials and just filled up a couple of pages. And then I did the same thing the next night, and I did the same thing the next night. And then I realized I was doing it every night. When I started, going back in the story, when I started with the sketchbooks, for the first, I think it was 18 months, you kept hearing from all these different sources that if you keep doing it as a daily practice, you will see improvement. In a year's time, you will look back on your sketchbooks and you will see a progression. And I remember at the end of that first year, I was so eager. I'd counted the days, so I knew exactly what the date was. It was the 28th of April. And I looked back at my sketches from my first sketchbook from a year ago, and I liked them better. And I was absolutely devastated. I thought, no, I'm supposed to have gotten better by now. Why haven't I? And it took me 18 months, not 12 months. It was after 18 months that I started seeing the improvement. And I thought, oh my gosh, is it going to take me another 18 months until I see some progression? But no, I kept progressing at a steady state after that. I ended up sketching nature, and I came across a man called John Muir-Laws who advocated for nature journaling. And I loved the idea of it, just being present with nature and asking questions, being really curious about nature, and not necessarily needing to find out the answers, but just asking those questions was really important, and journaling about those. So there would be lots of pictures, some writings, some numbers, but lots of asking. And so I found I was taking my sketchbook out and about and sketching nature and how it changed over the seasons. And I was really enjoying that, and occasionally my boy would come out and he would bring his sketchbook and his pencils out, and obviously he was done much quicker than I was because his attention span is not very long, but I would be there for a bit longer while he carried on walking or playing, and I would sketch. And eventually that led me to urban sketching. I can't exactly remember where I heard about it. Maybe I was researching other nature journalists and something came up about urban sketching. But obviously it's a very big movement at the moment, and it's a global movement, so there are urban sketcher chapters, is what they call them, around the world. And the Reading Urban Sketchers one, we weren't meeting up at the time, but I reached out to them and said, well, maybe we can do something online. And I think they were planning on doing that anyway. But before my first meetup, they'd asked if I wanted to be an administrator of the Urban Sketchers. So suddenly I was an administrator of Reading Urban Sketchers, which is wonderful, and I love doing it with two other wonderful women. A turning point came when we were doing an exhibition, an Urban Sketchers Reading exhibition at the local hospital. And during that exhibition, one of my paintings sold. Or it wasn't a painting actually, it was a pen sketch. And it was the first time that I'd actually done something like that and actually sold something, and it was a great feeling. And I applied to exhibit at the hospital again on my own, and they accepted my application. And at the end of that exhibition, I sold 3 paintings, and I was delighted. I couldn't believe it. And since then, I booked myself into more exhibitions and got accepted, and more shows, and suddenly I'm in a place where I have my work up every single month, most of the time, somewhere or other. Like any artist, I go through periods of feeling like I can't paint, that I'm not inspired. What am I doing? Why is nothing working? Every brushstroke I put down is horrible. And what I've come to realize is that those moments, even though it might last weeks and sometimes even months, those are the best times. It might feel horrible and you think it's never going to end, but it always ends. And what happens at the other end is some change. You've gone through some leap and you didn't know it was happening because everything was crashing and burning, but then suddenly something wonderful has happened and you're not where you were before. You're in a completely different space and things start flowing smoothly again. And how long that smooth sailing lasts, nobody knows, because once again, it will crash and burn and you will feel like you won't be able to paint and you'll have to get through that period again in order to make the next progression. I don't think artist block is necessarily triggered by imposter syndrome. I think lots of artists, even if they're really well established, feel imposter syndrome too. And it kind of goes on behind the scenes and people don't even realise. But I don't think artist block is triggered by that. And sometimes what I will do is I won't put pressure on myself, so I will pick up, if I've been using oils, I will pick up a pencil. And if I've been using pencil, I'll pick up watercolours or something like that. I will mix it up and that will ease the pressure on me a little bit. In fact, that is how I managed to pursue my desire to get better at portraiture. I really wanted to do figures and portraits, but I found it very mundane trying to learn how to do it because they never looked good. They never looked like the people I wanted them to look like. Getting a likeness is really hard anyway. So what I did instead is I realised that that wasn't working for me. I just sketched faces whenever I had artistic block. Or whenever I only had 5 minutes because I'd finished a painting and there were only 5 minutes left before I had to put the kids to bed. So I would pick up the pencil and just do a quick face. And I realised that I no longer hated practicing my portraiture. I loved it because I wasn't putting myself under a burden, an obligation to do it every single day. It wasn't a chore anymore. It was actually something that I looked forward to. Somehow, when the pressure is eased and I'm not thinking so hard about it, a painting succeeds. When my husband and I got married, we invited my music teacher, who had taught me kind of piano and singing from the age of 4. We invited her to my wedding and she said, "Oh, I've got a space if you'd like to teach music at the studio." So I started teaching the piano and singing to her students and loved it, and eventually stopped when I had my son. Now that I've got my own studio space with wonderful acoustics, this is where I sing, and my kids don't need to listen to me. And there are occasional shows that I get involved in with singing in the local area too. But I would paint even if my art was never seen by anyone, and I don't think I can not do that. And in the same way, I sing because that's who I am as a person.